Hi, this is Steve, V6WZ. I've put together a few videos that explain um, various hardware, antenna, and other switching uh, setups at my remote station, but I thought this video could provide some detail about the actual operating position. And also, I want to talk about um, different ways that are possible to control a remote station. When I first started thinking about doing a remote, I was full of questions and really unsure of not only how it may or may not work, but what how it ultimately would be set up and configured. And maybe this video will provide an overview for those that might be interested in thinking of a remote. Maybe it'll give some ideas that to those that are already operating a remote. Obviously, those that are very familiar with remote operation, this might be a bit redundant, although it'll show the method that I use to control the station. Um, my remote is located about 90 kilometers north of my home QTH. Um, it's about an hour and 15 minute drive to the north. And um, because of that drive time, like that's the one reality of a remote. One needs to be quite efficient in their time when driving to the remote and fixing things, repairing things, or building things. It's you got to maximize your time when you're at the remote. This photo is, though, the operating position. Here is actually where I'm sitting right now at the home office. And that's what I'm going to talk about is what does it look like when I'm operating the station. Um, Normally, when I operate, I'll be using the two monitors, as you can see here. On the left is the Flex, the smart SDR software, which drives the Flex radio. And on the right is a screen which is currently providing an image of the PC, which is located at the remote using a remote desktop application called TeamViewer. I've had good luck with using TeamViewer, though there are other remote desktop applications. And by the way, in a moment, I'm going to talk about the pros and cons and how you don't have to do it this way. But I view there to be benefits of using a remote desktop to control the station this way. Also in the photo, you can see below the one monitor is my K3. For over 3 years, I've operated my remote using the K3 and the remote rig boxes from Microbit. And it's a very efficient and effective system, and frankly, I love the K3. Lately, I've been migrating more to using the Flex, and I'm going to show you how both work. You'll notice also I have the Flex control knob for those that know the Flex system, and I find that handy when I'm using the PC only. By the way, I will reference the Maestro. I actually own a Maestro, but I find I really don't use the Maestro that much. Uh, any remote obviously needs internet. This is just a quick snapshot of the how I get my remote at sorry, my internet at the remote. I am rural. I'm in a surrounded by farmland, and there is no wired connection available. So I use what's called a WISP provider, a wireless internet service provider. I'm fortunate. I have two providers that I can choose from, and I've decided to get a contract with both, an account for both, and to do two things. One, to split the bandwidth and share the bandwidth a bit, and also to provide redundancy. The antenna on the right, the pizza box, that's pointing to a tower fairly close by and provides an LTE connection. And on the left is another small antenna pointing to an antenna that provides a WiMAX connection. In both cases, the download is about 4 to 5 megabits per second, and the upload is in and around anywhere from 1 to 2 megabits per second upload, which by home standards is pretty slow, but it proves more than adequate for the remote. So at the remote, this is in that trailer, in the shack. I have my equipment rack on the left. You can see the K3, my amplifier, and other hardware, which is talked about in other videos. I now also have the Flex. But you can see an operating table here, which has two monitors. These are set up to one PC. So I have a PC at the remote. And this is exactly what I'm going to talk about in a moment, and how, there are other methods. This is the method that I find works well for me. So this is what it looks like at the remote. By the way, now I even have a second PC, but that's for another reason. So again, this is that same photo. So here I am, and my normal operating setup, as I said, is to have the Flex on this window, and my log into the remote PC on the right window here. And I'm going to show you the details of this in a minute, just so you can have a feel for how I control the remote. Now, having said that, if I'm traveling, what I'll do is I'll have my laptop with me and connected either to a Wi-Fi connection somewhere, or even a data plan tethered through my phone. And in that case, I'll split the laptop screen, and in this case, you'll notice to the right is the team viewer view of my PC at the remote, and on the left I have the Flex Smart SDR software, which controls the radio. I also will often plug the Flex control knob into the USB, and that gives me added flexibility for tuning control. In fact, I just throw this in. I've presented this before at some presentations I've given locally, and this is maybe just to give some insight into just how remarkably efficient and effective remoting can be. This is a photo of myself sitting on a beach in the Northwest Cape of Australia. And in fact, the photo on the right, this is actually a snapshot of my iPhone, a screenshot, and this is showing my location. So this is where I was sitting, and you'll notice at the top I was logged into a 3G data plan that I purchased in Australia, and I tethered my phone data plan to my laptop. Sitting here on the beach during the day, I was logged into my remote station on the other side of the planet and working CWDX on 40 meters, while it was, of course, nighttime in VE6 land. So in spite of the massive latency, you can still operate your station, I'm telling you, anywhere in the world. That's been my experience. All right, so I want to show this because there are two different ways. I mean, perhaps there are others, but this is sort of a summary of two different ways to ultimately control this station. And what I'm mostly referring to is not so much controlling the radio, because that is largely defined by the infrastructure and the setup of the actual radio, and I'll touch on that. This is more about how do you control the peripherals at the station, which include switches and rotors and amps and that sort of thing. So that's where the difference comes in between these two different methods. On the left is a very common system where there is no PC located at the remote. Okay, there's no PC there at all. And what's done, of course, is at the top is the control station. Okay, this would be you at home. You have an internet connection, connecting the WAN to your router, and connected to the router through the LAN is your PC. On that PC is likely, if you're a Flex user, would be your Flex Smart SDR software. And then you'd have control software. This would be devices which will drive switches, rotators, amps, for example, maybe a camera streaming thing. And you'll have your logging and CW done on this PC, and it's sent over the internet to drive the radio. I also include another method. If you're not a Flex user, through the LAN you'll connect to the remote rig boxes. This is the Microbit RCC1258 box, and that does all the communication for the radio. So I would, in my case, have the K3 Mini. You could use any type of radio though with the remote rig box, and the remote rig box converts all the audio stream and the radio control through the internet to control the actual radio at the remote. So on the remote, at the remote in this instance, the internet comes in, the WAN is connected to the router at the remote. And through the LAN, your Flex radio is connected, which will talk directly through the internet and everything's good. Audio is streamed thusly. The same with the remote rig box. It's connected to the actual radio and the audio is streamed through that box as well as the control for the radio. Now, at this station though, through the LAN, there will be various Ethernet devices such as switches, your rotators, your amps control, and for example, cameras. Now, all of these devices need to be IP addressable, and that way through the proper port forwarding done in the router, those become controllable from the PC at home because you define the IP address of your WAN. Okay, what is your router IP address and what port are these devices on? And they will drive those switches, okay, and rotors and so on and so forth. On the right is what I do and another approach to this. So by and large, it's the same. We have our internet connection going to the WAN connected to your router at home, for example. And then we have the LAN connected to the PC connected through the LAN. And then the same, nothing has changed here. The remote rig setup is the same. The remote rig box connects to my K3. The difference is, in this case, on the PC, all I will have is my Flex Smart SDR software and one application called TeamViewer or any other remote desktop application. I've used Splashtop and I mean there are others as well. And so at the remote, we connect through the internet, whatever method we have, and connect to the router. The same, nothing has changed. The LAN connects to the Flex radio and everything happens and is defined by the Flex system to communicate with the radio. The same is true with the remote rig. This is all the same. The big difference is the LAN is connected, then you have a PC at the remote station. The difference here is that on this PC, well, for one thing, I can load Smart SDR software on the PC locally too, but that's for another reason, which I'll explain later. But on this PC, we have on this PC mounted loaded our control software for the same things, our switches and rotors, amp controls, cameras, and whatnot. And we also will have our logging and CW done here at the remote. So on the PC at the remote, I have, say, for example, Logger 32 or N1MM loaded at the PC at the remote. The difference here is that these devices, any devices that are connected, do not need to be IP addressable units. In other words, you can have USB devices that can be connected directly to the PC. And I think that's important because in terms of an advantage of this system, not all switches, say for example, rotor controllers, or in my case, I like to be able to configure my RBN skimmers, and I have a weather station, which I can't really access and control directly over the internet like on the left-hand setup. So all I need to do is to be able to control any device by a PC and using TeamViewer or any other remote desktop application. I can access that, okay, using TeamViewer. I will add for the Flex users, one thing I neglected to add to this diagram would be another LAN connection to the Maestro. Okay, and that would just sit over here. So it would be basically the Maestro would be controlling the router, controlling the Flex radio, and that would be transparent in both cases. Okay, so those are the two differences. There's pros and cons. I have created a video that talks about the benefit of having the logging program loaded remotely on the PC because of the problem that can happen when you're sending CW over the internet. And I've got experience doing that, and what can happen is your CW can become corrupted because of lost packets. And this isn't a maybe thing. I've actually recorded my CW, and especially during peak Netflix times, I lose dashes. Dots will turn into dashes, spaces will go missing, and sometimes a CW can be complete gibberish. And so, doing it this way, I know that my CW is always going to be consistent. All right, so uh, what does this really look like? So what I'll do, so this is now my screen. I'm just sitting here at my computer, just like I showed in that picture, and I'll log in using TeamViewer in this case. And if you haven't used a remote desktop application before, give it a try, because even just to play with it, I mean, it's freeware for non-commercial use, and you'd be surprised, I think, as to how transparent it is. So here is my station PC. All right, what you're seeing is the PC at the remote. And I have complete control of it. In fact, I'm going to just shrink this window so you can see this is its own window. All right, and this is, if you were sitting up at the remote, you'd see my cursor moving around. And so everything here is what I've loaded onto the PC up at the remote. So what I've got going here is in the back, it's very busy, but this is Logger 32 going away, and you'll notice that in fact, um, um, everyone's going to have a different layout that they use for Logger 32, but I have all my packet data streaming through VE7CC, and this is just running all the time. So anytime I pull up my TeamViewer window, everything's ready to go. All right, and in the logging window, everything is controlled here. I can point and shoot at anything in the band map windows, and my radio will instantly go there. Basically, that's how I've configured both the Flex and the K3. I also, here's the CW machine, so I will use this window to type CW. And that's how I'll actually send CW is using the keyboard, which is not optimal. I mean, obviously I would like to use a paddle, but I'm getting better and better at just using the keyboard CW. And as I explained in another video, that provides for, in my opinion, enhanced reliability. These compass dials I've discussed in another video this controls my Yagi, so I'm turning my 80-40 meter Yagi in the OptiBeam by pressing that. This is controlling my 160 meter transmit array, and this is controlling my beverages and my 9-circle array. So that's how I control those, and these are individual windows which I've control the relay boards. This is a relay board which can control many different things. I can turn lights on and off inside the shack. I can swap the receive sub and main antennas to the radios, and I can turn the ACOM amplifier on and off. For example, I just did that. And okay, so so this can control many different devices. Down here is a weather station that I have, and it's some software loaded on the computer, and I could see the wind speed and the current temperature inside and outside of the shack. This is a PowerMaster power meter, so I can identify I can see what the power is. From the transmitter. And again, this would be an example where this device is loaded on the PC and it's USB connected or through a COM port. And so, I mean, because I'm logged into the PC, this is readily available to show my power. And then I also have cameras. They're not really security cameras. I'm not looking for intruders as much as just to keep an idea on what's going on, and those cameras are loaded on a separate window, and I've just and I can pull that up. So this is a view currently of the remote station. This is one camera, and you can maybe see that it's currently snowing there, even though it's March. This is Alberta for you, and you can see my U.S. tower, and there's the trailer. So my camera is mounted on a post here. Here's another one. This is actually looking out of this window, and you can see I can keep an eye on my verticals. This is another one looking at the crank up tower, and I can actually zoom in on these. And this is a camera mounted on the wall, so I can sort of keep an eye on the physical status of the station. So That's an overview of how I control the remote station here using the remote desktop application TeamViewer, or you could use any other. Um, One last thing perhaps that's worth noting is because I do it this way and because I'm logged into the PC locally, of course, Smart SDR software with respect to the Flex radio can be loaded locally at that PC, and I can connect to the radio at the PC, at the remote, and of course in this case I'm connected through the LAN. I'm not connected over the internet. But most importantly, the way TeamViewer works and other desktop applications as well, they will stream any audio that is present on the PC. And of course, the Smart SDR software streams the audio. The radio audio to the speakers of the PC, and so that is made available, and I can hear that and drive and control the radio doing this rather than using the Smart SDR software separately loaded on the remote PC. Now, and then of course I can also key the radio using my using the Logger 32 program or N1MM or whatever I choose to use. Now the fact is, this is especially kind of helpful and cool if you think about it. And I've done this, I can actually log on to using my iPhone or my iPad, or if you could use a Samsung or a Google phone, and just load the TeamViewer remote desktop application. I can log in to the remote desktop. I can log into my PC at the remote, pull up the Smart SDR software just like this, and operate the radio using only the remote desktop application TeamViewer. Hopefully you're following me here, and I've actually done this, and I've actually worked DX operating split by just setting a split and listening to the DX, and I pick my transmit frequency, and I'll just send my call just using my clicking with my finger on the iPad, and I've successfully done that. So anyway, that's just another added benefit, and so the other thing that would go with that, sort of a parallel to that, is because all of the software and control devices are loaded locally here, I can use any PC anywhere. In other words, I can go to someone else's QTH or use anyone's laptop, and all I need to do is log in through TeamViewer to the remote station, and I have access to all of my switching and control and even sending CW. The point is, if you're set up where you don't have a PC at the location, all of that software and control software and device controllers do need to be loaded on the control PC or laptop. So that's perhaps another benefit to doing it this way, consolidating everything. Now, having said all that, look, I know there's reasons why at a remote you may not be able to have a PC resident. Maybe there's a power consumption concern. Maybe there's power outages that UPS supplies won't solve. So there's reasons why you wouldn't want to, but hopefully I've given you a snapshot of how this works. And as I said, I encourage you to say, for example, just try a remote desktop application if you haven't, because I think what you would be surprised is how responsive and transparent it is. When I'm using this logged into the remote PC, I cannot tell the difference. For me, for all intents and purposes, it's the same as sitting right at the PC. Hope you enjoyed the video. Please visit my YouTube channel if you're interested in other aspects of the remote. I've made a number of videos that show how certain antennas have been installed, my various switching for antennas and peripheral switching and things such as that. I've done that mostly because I'm hoping it might help others that are thinking of building a remote or just looking for some ideas. Thanks for visiting. This is Steve, E6WZ.